Trust deeds and trust deed foreclosure. Objectives. The objectives of this class are to understand how trust deeds work and their foreclosure process. Trust deed. Definition. A trust deed is a three-party collateralization instrument. In this arrangement, the debtor transfers land title to a third party as security for an obligation to a creditor. Another name for trust deed is deed of trust. Deed of trust and trust deed are synonymous terms. A trust deed creates a lien and other rights over a property. The main legal right a trust deed creates is the ability to cause the sale of the property for obtaining the funds to pay off the obligation. Causing the sale of a property is known as execution of trust deed. Execution of trust deed is foreclosure. An example of other legal rights is the assignment of rents. This clause, which is included in most trust deeds, allows the lender, in case of default, to collect rents from tenants. Another good example is due on sale. This clause allows the creditor to demand full payment as soon as the property is sold. Trust deeds are the collateralization instrument of choice on the West Coast. They have been used for decades. Because of their effectiveness, trust deeds are now common in many other states. Trust deed parties. Trust deeds are a three-party collateralization arrangement. The owner of the collateral property is the debtor, trustor, and grantor. A title company or attorney is the trustee and grantee. The creditor is the beneficiary. Workings of a trust deed. These are the workings of a trust deed. There is a property owner. From now on, this person will be the trustor and grantor. This person owns a property to be used as collateral. The property belongs to the owner. As a premise, the owner must have title insurance or insurable title. The owner will get a loan from a lender. From now on, the lender will be the beneficiary. The fact that the lender loans money to the property owner establishes a debtor-to-creditor relationship. In order to secure payment, the creditor will demand security for the performance of the obligation. For that, a trust will be formed, thus the term deed of trust. The trustee in this trust will typically be an attorney or title company. Most states require that the trustee be a licensed attorney in the state where the trust deed is created. The trustee will also be the grantee. This will typically be created through an escrow service or title company. It can also be done by a real estate attorney. In this trust, the trustor will grant the property in trust to the trustee with power of sale. The trust is to the benefit of the lender. Thus, the lender is the beneficiary of the trust. This is called beneficial interest. It is at this point that the property becomes collateral through trust deed. The obligation to pay will be documented in a promissory note. Title insurance will be issued by a title company. In case of default, typically the lender will appoint a successor trustee. Successor trustees are typically companies in the business of executing trust deeds in default. If default is not resolved, the trustee will execute the trust deed in a trustee's sale. Trust deed foreclosure. Unless poorly drafted, all trust deeds have power of sale. Trust deeds were designed for non-judicial foreclosure. However, it is the option of the beneficiary. Trust deeds can be foreclosed judicially or non-judicially. With trust deeds, non-judicial foreclosure is typical. Non-judicial foreclosure of trust deeds is by far the most common option. In fact, judicial foreclosures of trust deeds are highly unusual. Because of this, we will only analyze non-judicial foreclosure of trust deeds. Succession of trustee is typically the first step. Second, the debtor receives a notice of default letter, the NOD, from the trustee. In some states, a separate document, the Notice of Trustee Sale, NOTS, with the sale date is required. If the debtor reinstates the obligation, a notice of rescission or similarly named document will be issued. Trust deed foreclosure culminates in trustee sale. If the obligation is performed and satisfied, which means total debt payoff, the trustee will issue a deed of reconveyance. This instrument records the payoff of the debt and extinguishment of the trust deed. All states have heavy penalties for not recording the reconveyance within a specific time. Trust deed. Let's analyze how a trust deed works. This is a good example of a short-form trust deed. It reads, "This trust deed, made on, date of origination, between Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner as grantor, Mr. Attorney as trustee, and Mr. Big Bank as beneficiary. Grantor irrevocably grants to trustee, in trust with power of sale, the property, collateral property." Power of sale means non-judicial foreclosure. Appointment of successor trustee. In case of default, if the beneficiary decides to begin foreclosure, a successor trustee will be appointed. This is a good sample document. It reads, "Know all by these present that Mr. and Mrs. Homebuyer is the grantor, Mr. Attorney is the trustee, and Mr. Big Bank is the beneficiary under that certain trust deed dated date of origination. The undersigned hereby appoints Mr. Foreclosure Attorney. This is the foreclosure trustee, as successor trustee to have all the power of the original trustee effective immediately. This includes the power of sale. The successor trustee can now sell the property." Notice of default. After succession, the successor trustee will record the NOD. This is a good example. It reads, "Notice of default and election to sell." Reference is made to that certain trust deed made by Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner as grantor to Mr. Attorney or Title Company as trustee in favor of Mr. Big Bank as beneficiary, covering the following real property, collateral property description. This is the collateral property to be sold. It continues, "There is a default by grantor, owing an obligation, secured by the trustee, which authorizes sale in the event of default. This invokes the power of sale clause." It continues, "The beneficiary and trustee, by reason of the default, have elected to foreclose the trust deed, and to cause to be sold at public auction to highest bidder for cash the described property, to satisfy the obligation secured by the trust deed and expenses of the sale." Notice of trustee sale. In most states, the notice of default is sufficient and contains the trustee sale date. However, in some states, such as California and Nevada, the NOD does not contain the trustee sale date. In those states, the notice of trustee sale indicates the trustee sale date. This is a good example of a notice of trustee sale. Notice of trustee sale. This paragraph is the reference to the trust deed and collateral. Then it reads, "The undersigned trustee will, on date of trustee sale, at the hour of, time of sale, at, location of trustee sale, sell at public auction to the highest bidder for cash the real property described above." Rescission of notice of default. If the default on the loan secured by the property is cured, the foreclosure process will be rescinded, which means stopped. With this, the loan will be reinstated. The document that serves as evidence of this is the rescission of notice of default. Other similar names are used for this document. This paragraph is the reference to the trust deed and collateral. Then it reads, "By reason of the default being cured, the notice of default has been removed, paid, and overcome, so that the trust deed should be reinstated." This means no foreclosure. Deed of reconveyance. Once the debt is paid off, the document that demonstrates the performance of the obligation is the deed of reconveyance. This extinguishes the trust deed. This is a good example. It reads, Deed of Reconveyance. The undersigned trustee, under that certain trust deed dated date of trust deed origination, executed and delivered by Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner as grantor, conveying real property, collateral property. This is the property used as collateral. It continues that the obligation secured by the trust deed has been fully paid and performed. This means that the debt is paid off. The trust has ended. No more trust deed. Review. A trust deed is a three-party collateralization instrument. Deed of trust and trust deed mean exactly the same. The parties are the trustor, trustee, and beneficiary. Unless poorly drafted, all trust deeds have power of sale. Because of this, trust deeds are typically foreclosed non-judicially. Trust deed foreclosures are typically executed by trustees at a trustee sale.